Licensing Commission, and as we do each month, we'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Still want to say play ball.
Also, as we do every month, I need to let you know about notice of appeal. Pursuant to the provisions of Section 2.68-030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, notice is hereby given that if you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the entry of the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission's decision. We ask that you seek your own independent legal advice to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met. All right. The next thing on our agenda is the approval of minutes. Commissioners, has everyone received the minutes?
Yes. Yep.
All right. Is there a motion?
Approval.
Second.
Singer's second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The first item on our agenda today is records, general record company applications, and the consideration of advanced towing requests with owner-driver Andre Rivers. Mr. Fields?
Mr. Rivers' company is Advanced Towing and Recovery. He's filled out his application. Everything's in order. By rule, you'll need to consider that application.
Okay. Do we want to have Mr. Rivers come speak to us? Mr. Rivers, you here? Would you like to come say a few words?
How you doing, sir?
Great, thank you. Anything you'd like to tell us?
I just didn't put one item I didn't list one item that was boating under influence, and I just didn't know about. I didn't think it was related.
Okay. Is that something that has been?
Yeah, the application for the company is in order. When he filed his application to be a driver, he failed to put a 2009 BUI on his. And when I talked to him, he told me exactly what he just told you, that there were issues of boating, driving, and just failed to put it down.
Okay. Commissioners, anybody have any questions?
This BUI is actually showing on here. Is that updated after the fact?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Staff recommend this application?
No questions? Do I hear a motion?
I would move to approve the application, Mr. Rivers, for the permit.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I appreciate it.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
Good luck.
Next are record driver applications, and I won't go through all the names right at the moment, but Mr. Fields.
The applicants have applied. They're all in order. I would read them for you. Is Jody Creek, Keith Deere, Michael Ditta, Larry Elder, Hajar Hussein, Edward Mock, Anthony Long, George A. Pointer. Mr. Ramsey would like to hold separate Brandon Reasonover and DeAngelis Robinson. All those applications were filed appropriately and are complete.
Okay. Would we like to hear from Mr. Ramsey first, or do we want to potentially, is Mr. Ramsey here?
I'm not sure Mr. Ramsey's present.
All right.
I will move to approve the record driver applications for everyone Mr. Fields stated, save Mr. Anthony Ramsey.
Now your second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
On Mr. Ramsey, we could move him to the Hill in case he appears.
Yes.
Okay.
Next on the agenda, Ms. Lisa Murray, passenger vehicle for hire. Ms. Murray, can you come forward? Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Afternoon.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Was there anything you wanted to say before we ask questions, or do you want to have us just open the floor for these
Well,
gentlemen to ask
some of the
questions?
charges that I had on there was prior to my younger years. I didn't think that I really forgot about the dates or whatever, that they would come up, but that's about all.
Okay. All right. Any questions, gentlemen?
Mr. Fi-
She has representatives from the company that would like to hire her present as well.
Mr. Fields, can you tell us why
There were-
Ms. Murray was singled out?
When she made her application, there were three things that she failed to list on her original application. There was a 1992 larceny charge, then there was a 2002 vandalism charge, and then there was a 2008 vandalism charge that she did not include on her original application. And with that, through your practice and rule, we denied to bring and refer to the commission.
Okay.
Has it been updated since the first
Yes,
application?
she reapplied, and everything's updated, and her application's now in order.
Ms. Murray, I have just a couple questions on the application you did fill out. You put down an assault from 4 years ago. What's that about?
It was prior to my daughter. Well, she was harassing both of us. I mean, they was like best friends. There was a situation where she cut my daughter with a razor blade, had 20 stitches, and the next day we was going to the store, she was harassing her, and we had got into it.
I guess
Yes,
my
and
question is
they-
that you were convicted of assault,
Yes,
and you wrote in here that a girl cut your daughter with a razor blade, that your daughter had to have 20 stitches, right?
yeah.
How did you get charged with assault then?
Well, she was, the next, just like I said, the next day that we had seen her or whatever, but she was harassing us, following us, doing crazy stuff, and we got into it.
All right.
Yeah.
And you got charged and you pled guilty?
Yes.
It's written in here that that was 4 years ago. Would that be around 2009?
I believe so.
Okay. And then in 2004, you had another assault conviction?
Mm-hmm.
And that was for fighting with your,
My brother.
says your brother?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do I hear a motion on?
I'd like to hear from the company that's offering to hire her,
Sure.
if we don't mind.
No problem.
Well, we do background checks when we hire everyone, and we don't hire anyone with a felony conviction, which she does not have. But Lisa has been a good employee. She's been good customer service and respectful to her teammates and to our customers. So I'll defer to your decision. But
Could you tell us your name, please, and what
I'm
company you
sorry.
represent?
I'm Beth Duncan, and Human Resources Manager with Carolina, Tennessee.
Okay. And you are willing to hire her and put her behind a car out there?
She is currently working for us. This is just her permit to
Okay.
do our airport shuttle service.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
I've got a question for you.
Nope.
How long have you been with the company now? How long have you been with the company?
Me,
Yes, ma'am.
3 years.
Okay. Good. That's all.
You don't have any pending charges at this time, do you?
No, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'll make a motion.
Sure.
I move for approval.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is a driver application for Edward M. Seavey. Mr. Fields?
Mr. Masubi's been a driver for quite a while. Last week on Monday, he was stopped by Metropolitan Police Department and was given a ticket for speeding. They checked his permit, and his permit had expired at the end of the month. He had not got in the 2-week period, had not gotten back in to renew. So when I was on the phone with the policeman, I asked the policeman to send him to the office. Mr. Masubi came straight to the office and actually beat the policeman there. So, and he said he wasn't speeding to get there. Mr. Masubi has not worked for the last 2 weeks. He's currently suspended with Allied, but Allied's prepared to put him back on if the commission will grant his permit.
When was his permit expired?
It expired on September the 30th.
Okay.
He was one of those in that time.
He was pulled over in October.
Yeah.
Mr. Nsibi, what happened that you didn't get your permit renewed?
Sir, I didn't come here to argue or make a statement or something. I made a mistake. It's my fault. I'm sorry.
Did you forget to renew your permit?
I have high blood pressure. I didn't know my BP was high. So I went there. They say it was high. They put me on medication. Then it's done. I have my permit right now. My DOT is approved. So that's what happened. And that day, I was going to do my medical DOT, and I was using the taxi. That's what happened. It was a mistake, and I'm sorry.
Mr. Fields, do you have a recommendation on this one?
Mr. Masubi has, with one, to my knowledge, he only had one problem with the commission over the years. He had a several problem 4 or 5 years ago where it was a couple of days after. And again, that's not necessarily an unusual thing for cab drivers. It's unusual for us to catch them necessarily, but it's not unusual for them to come in after the time period. They're doubly, I wouldn't say punished, but when they fail to renew on time, we begin them as a new driver, which means they're going to start with new fingerprints. Everything that a driver would have to do if they were brand new, they have to actually do. So there's additional charges that are, in addition to being off work a couple of weeks, there's additional charges he had to undergo, including another fingerprinting and police background check.
So there are consequences.
There are consequences. Aside from not working, the consequences, additional fees to to get your permit in a place where it could be approved. What
do you need from us?
You would have to say that he can have a permit, and we will go back and issue his permit. Because everything else, he's done everything he needs to do now. Just because of this, he'll have to be here. He'll still have to answer for the speeding ticket. He's also going to be going to, in addition to the ticket that he received, he also received a Metro citation for violation of the ordinance. So he will appear in environmental court as well. So he has 2 more court dates. In addition to appearing to you, he's got 2 different judges to go to.
And if convicted of those offenses, does it impact his permit?
It would not.
Any other questions, gentlemen?
Any motions?
I'll make a motion that we approve Mr. Nsimbi to have his permit again.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. And the next thing on the agenda is the request from Keith Cares to operate on a downtown route. And
They're not present. Could I take 5 minutes and I've sent an email, but I've not got an answer back. I can make a call to Mr. Blackman's office and see if there's a problem.
okay,
So if I could have just a brief adjournment.
okay, take a 5-minute adjournment.
Hey, I think you may have be ascending to that seat of throne there, where you're.
Somebody want to address that?
Mr. Fields, why is he needing to appear before the board?
Mr. Ramsey's case was not unlike some of the other drivers that we've had. He failed to disclose 3 charges, reckless endangerment that would have been in, I think 2001. I'm trying to put my hand on that particular one. And then 2, reckless endangerment 1999, and then a theft in 99, and an assault in 99. So it was all 3 charges back in 1999 that he failed to include on his original application. On the second application, he did. If he were present, there would be, aside from you having an opportunity to question him, there would not be, it's all in order.
Is this the first time he's been back up on the second application?
Yeah, this first time before you.
I would make a motion to defer Mr. Ramsey to the next meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And one other thing we need to take care of real quickly, the election of the chair. I think, I don't vote, but I think we should probably wait till we have more members here to hear that. So if somebody would like to.
I'll move to defer that to the November meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We've got that out of the way now. All right. So item number 9 on horse-drawn carriages, we have a request from Keith Carriage to operate on the downtown route. I think Mr. Blackburn is here. But let me, before you start, I need to actually ask our legal to give me and the commission some information just so we know exactly what we're talking about here on this particular.
Basically, the provision for a certificate in order to operate a horse-drawn carriage business is provided for to be an annual certificate. People apply for it. It lasts a year, and then they reapply. The certificate, the provisions in the code do say that a certificate can contain limitations, and one of those limitations that is listed is a limitation as to route. And it is my understanding from TLC staff that at present, the certificate that Ms. Keith has is limited as to route to Centennial Park. So that is kind of, if that is correct, that is the status of her current annual certificate based on her own application. And so the question would be, if you change that, basically I think it is effectively a reapplication and the issuance of a new certificate to her business to operate. And just in terms of consistency, I know the commission decided a couple of months ago that before you issued new certificates, you wanted to look at the results of a traffic study of downtown traffic. So I don't know how this fits into that entire framework. I'm sure Mr. Blackburn can address that, but I just wanted to give you that context.
Thank you. I'll give you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, gentlemen. First, I really appreciate Mr. Fields' courtesy in giving me a call. This was not on my calendar, and there was some email communications. I was out of town last week a good bit of the time, and that may explain it, but I do appreciate this very much. Ms. Keith applied actually many years ago. There was a memorandum that was sent out from Mr. McQuiston in June of 2004 announcing a moratorium on the issuance of certificates of public convenience and necessity for new carriage companies. I say that because that's sort of the premise of what else we're discussing. In August 25, 2010, Mr. McQuiston wrote to Ms. Keith and said that her application for this certificate was approved, but that the condition was that her company would not be allowed, or this says authorized, to operate from the carriage stands in downtown Nashville until or unless the moratorium on additional permits is lifted. And that was sort of her status up until today. And there's a great deal of controversy that surrounds that whole time period, and I'm not here to revisit that. You've probably heard some of those things. Was there actually a moratorium that this commission authorized? I don't know that one way or another. Certainly Mr. McQuiston treated it that way. There have been numerous complaints that he didn't apply, that he didn't persist in the moratorium, that others got permission despite what he had said. All of that is sort of academically interesting, but the fact is now there is, how many women are able to operate presently? 2. Out of all of those downtown, there are only 2 women. And there haven't been, to my knowledge, any issues involving Ms. Keith, her behavior, citations, nothing of this nature. And presently, you only look for yourself to operate, or would you have another person? Just herself? And during what time periods?
Probably only on long weekends.
Yeah. So presently, she only wishes to have permission to operate downtown on long weekends. Now, we have anticipated and hope that this ordinance will go through. I don't know what the status of that is, but as we've discussed before, I would think that once that has been accomplished, that a lot of these problems will be moot because there'll be plenty of room. The business as it's operated in this area, the narrow area, and I need to ask Mr. Field, has that already been somewhat enlarged? The route has been extended. I saw a map about that.
We've, because of some issues we've had with actual construction work downtown, some new street paving, that sort of thing, a temporary route was approved through the Traffic and Parking Commission. So they're actually operating on a little bit of a different route than is actually there, based on permitting.
There was some questions I read about the horseshoes affecting the pavement, some kind of maintenance issue. It looked to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it looked to me like the scope of the route, though, was somewhat larger.
A little, mileage-wise, just a little bit.
I would just submit to you that that one person on long weekends is not going to have any significant impact upon traffic or anything else. You know, we're not here to argue about disparate treatment or any of those things. I only mention this because I don't think you'll find that Ms. Keith was involved in any of those petty controversies that we've seen and that you've heard. I don't think she's ever been involved in anything of that nature and doesn't wish to be. Mr. Smith, one of the operators, is here and authorizes me to say that he has, from his standpoint, he has no opposition to this himself. And so during this short period of time, we hope short period of time, while this ordinance process is going through and while the whole scope of the area is being broadened, we simply ask that Ms. Keith be allowed, not granted a new certificate because she has a certificate, but that the condition imposed simply be lifted so that she can operate from downtown. And hopefully, we get through this process, and after the first of the year, all of these things can be put into a more sensible organizational framework.
Okay. Go ahead. I was just going to say, to answer your question, I believe that third and final reading is November 5th for the council.
Thank you.
I believe that's correct.
Is there any issues with traffic and parking where the carriage stands are set? Is there, by adding another carriage?
We continue to have stand issues. As the route changes and as the zone goes into place, the thinking is that there will actually be, we'll create an illusion, if not reality, of more space because the carriages will be more dispersed and going in other places. They'll actually more likely use the carriage stand on Commerce. There are some proposals that I'm not sure are finalized to actually add an additional carriage stand in the downtown area as well. And what I'm hoping is going to happen once on November 5th, assuming it passes third reading, and I have no reason to believe it won't, is we'll go back to Traffic and Parking Commission staff, ask for them to approve what they need to approve, then bring to you at your November meeting what they're proposing and ask you to adopt that. What I think that will be a series of zones covering, for instance, the downtown area. What extent, I'm not sure, but a pretty large area of downtown, possibly one in the Gulch, maybe one that would cover Bicentennial Mall in Germantown, maybe even one in East Nashville, that would actually give the carriage companies an opportunity to go in lots of places where they can't go to now. So we're continuing to work very closely with traffic and parking to try to ease the burden, ease the issues. It's been relatively quiet. We've had a few bumps, and you'll hear some of those in November, but generally speaking, I've only had one company say that they didn't think it was a good idea. Beyond that, I've just not had other comments.
And that ordinance,
Sorry, go ahead.
that ordinance is from the river to the interstate, correct? Or the interstate to interstate? Expanding the-
Actually, it just leaves it open to the traffic and park, and I'll defer back over to legal. They may want to comment.
I think what you were about to say is correct, that basically there's a kind of a collaboration with Traffic and Parking Commission and then kind of a future need to change the existing rules and promulgate a new rule by you all. Because there is a current rule that limits the standard route to a very prescribed, turn left here, turn right there route. And once the legislation passes, then it opens it up to the idea of approving zones as well as routes. It needs to be in consultation with traffic and parking staff, which is, as Billy says, that step is anticipated to be handled. And then at that point, once that consultation has occurred and they've approved some routes, and they'll consult with MNPD as well in that process, so these will be MNPD approved as well, then they will come back before you, and basically you'll just decide whether you want to change your rule to adopt the new zones and routes.
Okay. I have one last question. When you were first giving us the summary of this, did you state, let's say the commission decides to approve Ms. Keith's application, do we need to, is it a new application, or do we edit the existing permit?
The way the code reads, it provides for an annual certificate, and it says that the certificate can have limitations on it, and in Ms. Keith's case, I think it does. It says Centennial Park. But Mr. Blackburn is suggesting that this would be a kind of an amendment of that certificate as opposed to a new certificate. The rules don't speak to an amendment of a certificate one way or another. So it's not really contemplated, but...
What would be the best way for the commission to handle it if approved?
I mean, my goal is for you always to be consistent, and special exceptions are challenging from that perspective. Ms. Keith's case is kind of unique because of the Centennial Park thing, and so there may be some reasons for that. I think if you're going to deviate from what you have said would apply to all other carriage companies and applicants for new certificates, then it would be good for you all to articulate your rationale for doing that.
Let me ask the question in another way. Supposition that they do pass this on third reading. Based on what you're saying, then we're going to have to potentially allow people to move into other zones that are only right now allowed in
You don't
downtown.
have to. You have discretion to.
Well, but it won't just open it up for everybody to go to whatever zone
It won't
they
change
want to go to.
it won't change the provisions in terms of certificates and applications for certificates. It will just change the routes and zones available to existing certificate holders.
So essentially, everybody will have to come back with a new certificate.
No, it wouldn't change their certificates. It would just change where they can use those certificates, basically.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is that eventually we're going to have to do this anyway.
Let me clarify. I think I can clear this up. Everybody else's certificate does not have the limitation as to route.
Okay,
They are
great.
limited only as to the route that's prescribed in the rule, which is what you all would change after the rules and zones ordinance passes.
Mr. Chairman, may I show you this memorandum?
Sure.
It's and I understand what council is saying, and I don't disagree with it. I think the way this actually was done, though, is a certificate was granted subject to a condition premised upon a moratorium.
I understand.
And so if the condition is removed, then I don't know that there'd have to be a new certificate issued. It's simply a removal of a condition. And there's been discussion about about that and about litigation about that, which I think is a waste of time and money because the problem is just that close to being solved. And all this would do would be to treat Ms. Keith in a fair way that's not inconsistent with that letter. It should have or memorandum is simply a removal of a condition. And I would assume, and Mr. Fields, correct me if I'm wrong, I would think that we are now we're past the peak season. Obviously, in that lower Broad area, you'll have situational traffic jams, which make it difficult for the carriages, period. But this is not the dense usage that we see in July. I don't think it would really harm anything.
Let me go into the question about harm. I was looking at, Ms. Keith, your email to Mr. Fields on March 22nd, 2013, and it just outlined some things that I was curious about. According to what you said here, was that at the time of the moratorium, which I think was in 2004, that there were 10 companies operating with a total of 25 carriages, and based on the sending of this email, you had indicated there were now only 6 companies and 14 to 15 carriages.
Right.
And Mr. Fields, do you feel confident in that assessment of the number of carriages operating downtown?
Yeah, there are 14 that can operate on the streets in downtown Nashville. And again, when we started the regulatory process back in 2002 and finished, I think, in 2003 in that time period, we had many more carriages on the street than we have now. We also had a broader area. And over the years, the numbers of carriages and the companies reduced, and then the area shrank with it. Okay. And what the ordinance issue that we're talking about for third reading actually would go back to more, it'd look a whole lot more like what it looked like when we started.
All right, so if I can understand this historically, a moratorium was put into effect in 2004 for any more permits or certificates to operate downtown, and the public policy behind that was because of limited space, not overcrowding the streets with carriages and parking and things of that nature. And at that time, there were 10 companies and probably 25 carriages, but a bigger area that they operated in. The area shrunk, and so did the number of companies and carriages. And then I guess you were approved in 2010 with the restriction with the covenant that you could only operate out at the Centennial Park area.
No, I could operate anywhere in Davidson County that was approved by parking commission for special events and so on. And when I applied for it, it was under the understanding that I could go downtown after normal attrition or something happened with one of the other carriage companies. That was my impression of the way that Brian wrote it, and when we spoke about it.
Does that happen? Are you aware of any other permits that have been permitted for this area since then?
Yes, one this last year, or was it? Yes, this last year. Because normally about once a year I would contact Brian, or this year Mr. Fields, and just tell him, don't forget me, I'm still around. And then when I heard about another company just getting a permit,
Okay.
quite upset.
But at this time right now, you have a certificate allowing you to operate in the Centennial Park area, and you're asking us to allow you to operate downtown now.
Yes.
Okay.
In addition to.
In addition to, and if I understand correctly, procedurally, what legal is telling us is that this is the reading of the rules. It sounds like if one of the ways to do this is to actually make it a new certificate that removes any conditions to it. And what Mr. Blackburn's suggesting is that we not have a new certificate, but simply remove the covenant or the restriction on this currently pending certificate. And one other thing to consider here is the fact that at some point this board suggested that new certificates wouldn't be issued until we had a chance to look at the study about the impact on downtown parking and traffic. Am I assessing that pretty much correctly?
I think so. The study, my initial belief, the study would be done in October.
And we found out we were wrong about that.
It will not be until after the first week.
Okay.
The zone issue will be resolved quickly.
And I would add that Ms. Keith is correct. Any driver, or excuse me, any company holding a certificate can also, in addition to the companies that don't have the limitation as to route on their certificates, which I think is every other company, can follow the standard route downtown, but if that's in the rule. But if they want to do a wedding or any other special event, somewhere else, they have to get special permission from traffic and parking, just like Ms. Keith does.
And when do we expect to know, with the final reading in November, when would it come before this board about opening up the zones instead of routes?
I'm hoping it's going to be at your meeting on the in November, it'll be on the third Thursday of the month. But my hope is that if everything passes...
Isn't it early because of Thanksgiving?
Well, 1 week early, so the fourth Thursday.
Perhaps in November.
I believe in November we'll ask you to hold a public hearing to discuss it and consider it.
And cutting through everything, basically what we're doing is considering about giving Ms. Keith about 4 weeks to operate downtown if she so. Mr. Blackburn, what's your client say about maybe amending the special condition to operating on long weekends, operating only on long weekends? I can state this a little bit better, but amending the special condition to where she could operate on long weekends downtown as was suggested earlier.
Is that what you're seeking on the short-run basis? That's what you just,
Yes.
That was what I understood that you said.
I heard that. I'm just, I went through all the requirements that everybody else has gone through. I pay the same fees every year. I go under the same rules. Another permit was issued while I'm waiting. And so would I have to go through this again in a month or two or even a year?
Well, I think, Ms. Keith, it's not for me to say, it's for these gentlemen to say. But my understanding is that process is going to occur regardless. When this process is completed with the ordinance, and then the commission acts as it chooses after that ordinance, then the whole thing is going to have to be reorganized to contemplate the new circumstances on the ground. You would be involved in that if you chose to be, regardless of what happens today. So what we're really talking about is, in the short run, do you seek more than doing long weekends? You're not asking for daytimes, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Wednesdays. You're not asking for that. Just Friday through Sunday.
Correct.
Until that issue until we have to address it along with everyone else.
That's right.
I hope that answered your question.
I take it she's in favor of it.
But in the reality, most of the companies do actually operate 3 days a week. Now, there are some that work more than that. Some work every night. Some only come on weekends. Some don't come. They may be gone 3 or 4 months, and some may take off the winter. It just, but typically on special holidays, around Thanksgiving, around Christmas, you're going to see more activity. When it gets cold in January and February, you're going to see less activity.
Mr. Fields, I'm going to put you on the spot. Any opinion about what impact, if this commission were to approve Ms. Fields for Friday through Monday on the weekends, you got any idea about whether that would impact in negative effect parking and traffic downtown over the next few months?
In my conversation with the police and with traffic and parking, I've asked that question. I said, is there a place where you want to call a tipping point, where it's just too much is too much? And I said, if another carriage or 2 or 3 or 5, in other words, trying to buy, we have two of the companies have 4 permits and are able to operate 4 carriages. Another one's able to operate 3. We've got one with 2, and then we've got a couple with 1 each. So out of the total of 14, it's kind of it's sort of an interesting combination of how we got to that point. I'd like to believe that when the zones are available to us, we're going to be able to work with the industry to actually figure a way to reduce the number strictly in the downtown area, but disperse them around the county, maybe with additional permits operating in other areas, just not so many in the downtown area. Directly to your point, I do not believe, you knew I was going to get to it. Directly to your point, I do not believe that it would necessarily impose any kind of devastating or long-term effects in the downtown area. It will be more crowded. The zones, we believe, however, will will, just by the nature of the zones, they're not all going to want to go to the same area. There are going to be some folks that want to see the Grand Ole Opry at the Ryman, and there's going to be others that want to see the Bicentennial Mall, and there's going to be others that may want to go all the way over to operate out of a zone that might be down Music Row to look at some of the things there. So I believe it'll actually disperse from around downtown once that happens. I don't believe one more carriage downtown is going to make a difference one way or the other, except in this case.
There are
Thanks,
several
sir.
other certificate holders that have pending requests. There are several other certificate holders that have pending requests for additional.
Yes, I will say this. There are other requests for additional permits. And again, I think what I would do is try to fit it all together, working with the industry, which we may be at a balance point where we can actually get a few things done, to come back and develop a rule that would potentially give people more permits up to a level. I mean, frankly, if we were doing this ordinance today, I would have limited all the companies to 2 permits each on the front end. But we didn't do that. And so now we have as many as 4 and as few as 1.
If we were to make a change on this particular case today, is that going to open up the water or break the dam, and other people are going to come in here in November, December, and January wanting it?
Those applications are already there. I don't know the answer to that because I can't tell you. Legal may want to might be able to say a little more. The one difference is Miss Keith does have a certificate, and the others already have certificates. They have exist. There's at least 3 more requests for 1 additional permit each.
Okay.
She's asking for a removal of a limitation that changes her route.
Yes.
They are all asking for additional permits that would allow them to put additional carriages on the existing route. So there's some distinction. My recollection, and this is really maybe beyond my role, my recollection is at the meeting at which y'all discussed waiting for the consultation study, there were several people who expressed that they were interested in new permits right now, and that if Ms. Keith got one, they would want one too.
But we don't have to necessarily vote to give her a new permit today.
No, basically, if you have a certificate and you want additional carriages, more than 1, you can put that in your application, and you can get permits for those carriages. So in her case, it's a 1 carriage certificate, so it's not really a question of separate additional permits.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Thank you all. Yes.
Can I borrow it just a second? I'll get back to you though. Sorry.
Okay.
I'll get back to you. I just want to hold on to it a minute.
Any discussion?
I'd like to make a motion, I just don't know how to make it.
I'll jump in there.
I'll let you know.
I'd like to make a motion that on behalf of Ms. Keith, that the same certificate stays in place, that the current restrictions on her certificate be amended and in part remove the ones that are currently pending restricting her to Centennial Park, and that we allow her, with this proviso, that we allow her to operate Friday through Monday in the downtown route area. Mr. Field, well, does that sound like that would cover what we need to cover legal, Mr. Field?
It would.
1254.050 does say that among the limitations, in addition to route schedules, can be limited as well.
Okay.
So,
And just for clarification, what I'm making a motion to do is that perhaps not remove the conditions that are in there, except for the fact that we make an exception that Friday through Monday, Ms. Keith would be permitted to operate on the route downtown.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. That brings us to number 10 on our list, other business. Mr. Fields?
I don't think I have any other business. I'm hoping I will have none for today. I suspect that we will be bringing a public hearing or 2 for some rule changing at your November meeting, and we'll do the normal public notice and share that information with you shortly. But other than that, we're continuing to work with traffic and parking, as you instructed, on the downtown mobility study. I suspect that hopefully by November, I'll also be able to share with you some interim suggestions and solutions to some of the issues that we've dealt with, ranging from carriage stands to taxi cab stands. I would inform you we have one new cab stand downtown. If you'll look at 4th and Korean Veterans Boulevard on the south side, on the inbound lane, we have a lane of taxi cabs that are now servicing the Omni. I would also tell you we're working very closely with the Convention and Visitors Corporation on, as well as others on the downtown New Year's Eve plan on how we were going to get people out of downtown after the Hank Williams Jr. concert and the guitar drop.
All righty then. All right, then I guess it's time for our favorite motion.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Okay.